Why did you become a priest? Well, all my life, since I was a boy of around 5, I always had the feeling that God was calling me to become a priest. And it's something that has been with me all of my life from that point on. And about 50 years ago, I finally became a priest, and I still have the same feeling that that's what God wanted me to do. So that's why I became a priest, because I felt a call from God to become a priest. There are a few questions about the main altar here and the baldachin above it. So I had planned to do a special one day about that, but I'll try to explain some things about it. So the very first question has to do with it. We can see some statues of the saints in the front columns of the baldachin and in the pulpit. Who are they? Their names. So I'm going to leave the microphone and just walk over to the baldacchino or the baldachin and explain a little bit about the iconography and the statues and the saints that are there. Okay? Years ago, when the cathedral was first built, the altar was different from what it is now. This altar that we have here was put into the cathedral approximately in 1942. And at the same time, the canopy above it, the technical word architecturally is a baldachin, or the Italian baldacchino, was made specifically to differentiate the old altar, which was removed, and have a covering for the new altar. So if you look, it's a beautiful part of St. Patrick's Cathedral, and if people from all over the world were to see a picture and they would see this, the picture that you see right in front of me, they would say, oh, that's St. Patrick's, because it's so distinct and so very special. The baldacchino was put here in the 1940s by Cardinal Spellman as he changed the altar from the one that had been here from 1879 to the 1940s. That altar was sent to Fordham University, and even today it is still used in the University Church at Fordham up in the Bronx. This altar here, if you look at it, is a very simple altar. It has 2 columns, and in the middle is a representation of St. Peter steering his boat, and it represents the St. Peter is signified by the church, and the boat by the church, and St. Peter, the Pope, is steering the church. So that is what the significance of the altar decoration is. The carving of St. Peter guiding the boat, the Holy Father guiding the church, Catholic Church throughout the world. And on the sides of on the 4 piers that support the canopy are various saints. In the middle, right above the altar, is a statue of Christ the King in glory. It's very well done. And on the very, very top, you can see there is St. Michael the Archangel. You can't see it now, but on the exact opposite of the end of the church is St. Gabriel above the choir gallery. And we always say that at night, Michael and Gabriel talk to each other and talk about the people that have come to visit St. Patrick's. On the 4 piers, in the front and in the back, are statues that were bronze carvings to celebrate various saints. So facing you, on your left, we begin on the very top with St. Athanasius, and then St. John Chrysostom, then St. Ambrose, and St. Augustine. Augustine, Ambrose, Chrysostom, and Athanasius. Athanasius and John Chrysostom were Greek fathers of the church. Ambrose and Augustine were Latin fathers of the church. Very important for the history of the Catholic Church throughout the world. And on the other side are Catholic saints who established religious orders. So on the very top is St. Benedict, below him St. Dominic, below him St. Francis of Assisi, and below him St. Ignatius Loyola. the founder of the Benedictines, the Dominicans, the Franciscans, and the Jesuits. So they are very, again, important in the history of the church, and certainly very special to Cardinal Spellman when he created this baldachin with its iconography. On the back, which you can't see, and you have to trust me, or you have to look when you finally come, there are the same groupings of saints on both of the piers facing the other way. And so we have on one of the piers is Melchizedek, Abraham, Moses, and David, Old Testament prophets or kings, symbolizing the ancestors of Jesus and the importance of his being the Messiah. And then on the other side, on that side, are Isaiah the prophet, Simeon, who took Jesus in his arms when he was presented in the temple, John the Baptist, and St. Peter. Again, for the history of the church, important. The statue of Jesus facing us is Jesus the high priest. Facing the other way is Jesus the teacher. Again, all carved in bronze. I promised that I would do something that one of my questioners asked me to do, and to talk a little bit about some of the chalices that we use at St. Patrick's Cathedral. So if you've been live streaming for any length of time, you've seen most of these chalices being used for the Mass. And so I just want to explain about a couple of them and their significance, because all of these that we have on the altar today all have significance to them, and they're important for the cathedral and ultimately for the people who attend Mass and listen to Mass. So when I first came here to St. Patrick's, I realized that very often on the bottom of our chalices and our other religious articles would be engraved the names of the person who gave the object to St. Patrick's, sometimes the date, sometimes the occasion. But for us and for most parishes, that would be a very common thing. And what I discovered at St. Patrick's is that very, very many of our chalices and ciboria do not have anything inscribed underneath it. So, for example, these two, Monsignor Ritchie, we want to thank you for enriching our Christian life each day. We listen to Mass, you help us pray daily. You are truly a beacon of hope, and that's what we try to do here at St. Patrick's, and I'm grateful that this family recognizes it. My question is about the song, The 12 Days of Christmas. Is the below commentary accurate? And so if you remember the song, on the first day of Christmas, my true love gave to me. And so there is a Catholic interpretation of what each of those gifts on the first day, second day, third day, etc. And it's a interpretation that is used to, that might have been used many centuries ago, or some centuries ago, to teach the Catholic faith to people. And if you go through it, and it's way too long to use this morning, but there are ways of equating, for example, the first day of Christmas. The partridge in the pear tree represents Jesus, the Son of God, whose birthday we celebrate on the first day of Christmas. So these gifts on the days of Christmas can be interpreted as ways of explaining our Catholic faith, and it has been used by people over the years. I don't know if it originally was meant to be that, but it has been used that way in a very profitable way. Okay, question from a couple that has baffled my husband and me for years. Why does the Catholic Church, or should I say many individual parishes, show the Blessed Mother, St. Joseph, and baby Jesus separate? We are especially interested in family and the importance of family. Now, the image of the Holy Family, which is Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, is an image that you see so often in different contexts. We have an altar, one of the shrines that used to be here before we put the baptistry, and it's to the Holy Family, and the image of the three persons is there. And in many parishes they do have shrines or images of the Holy Family where the three are together. Sometimes people would like to look at an image of the Blessed Mother or St. Joseph or Jesus by themselves, just because that's an inspiration to them. In the back of the church, we have an image of the child, Holy Child of earth and heaven, as it's called, an image of the Christ child. And it's a very beautiful one that I remember from when I was a boy. But so the image of the Holy Family can be all three together, and or it could be each of the members of the Holy Family. So it depends on the taste or the spiritual importance to the person who creates the image, whether they want to have individual or one of the Holy Family together. These two chalices that you see right here in front are very much used. Every Sunday we use one or the other. Very often when Cardinal Dolan celebrates the Mass, we use one or the other of these two. Neither of them has anything written underneath it, but let me show you this first chalice that is very elegant, and it has enamel pieces on the bottom with portraits or with religious iconography of very important and very beautiful miniatures. You can't really see them very well, but there's the crucifixion. There's, I don't know which, this is St. John the Baptist, the Blessed Virgin, and a symbol for the Church as the Holy Mother of the Church. And it's in beautiful colors. I don't know if you can see the colors. And on the top it has angels in miniature. It's definitely gold. It's probably silver that is plated with gold, but it's very kind of a heavy chalice, and we do use it very, very often. Its companion is this one, much simpler. It doesn't have the colorfulness of the first chalice, but it once again has a lot of iconography in it. There's the crucifixion, there's the Blessed Mother, there's the Way of the Cross, there's St. James on pilgrimage, there's the putting of Jesus into the tomb, and Jesus in the Garden of Olives before the crucifixion, before he was taken away. And in the node, which you might see here, various saints are carved, and once again in gold, probably silver and gold on top. But once again, it's a very precious chalice. Now, besides the fact that we use these two very often for the cardinal or on Sunday for the liturgy, they have the significance of having been used by Pope Benedict when he came here to St. Patrick's Cathedral to offer Mass. In the year 2008, he said Mass here, and then he said Mass in Yankee Stadium. And he used this one in Yankee Stadium, and he used this one when he was here. So even though there's nothing inscribed on them, we don't know the history behind them, but we do know, because I experienced it here with the Holy Father, that they were used by Pope Benedict when he was here at St. Patrick's. St. Patrick's Cathedral has had 4 Holy Fathers visit us. There was Paul VI, John Paul II, Benedict XVI, and Pope Francis. All 4 of them were here at different times going back to the 60s, and the most recent visit was Pope Francis coming here in the year 2015. In the year 2008, when Pope Benedict was here, he celebrated Mass, and he's the only Pope that has celebrated, this is here in New York, he's the only of the 4 popes that celebrated Mass here at St. Patrick's Cathedral. It was a great and glorious day. I still remember it very, very well. And we used 1 chalice here and 1 chalice in Yankee Stadium. And we were very honored to use them. So every time Cardinal Dolan or I celebrate Mass and we use one of these chalices, we're reminded of the visit of Pope Benedict XVI to St. Patrick's in 2008. want to show you another chalice. Once again, this is a very precious chalice. It has semi-precious stones, and it has Irish designs all over it. It's a very symbolically Irish chalice. And this one is different from the others because in the bottom it is inscribed, and it was given by Cardinal John Foley on the anniversary of his consecration as Bishop of New York. And it's written in in Latin and in Irish. There's an Irish inscription on the bottom, which of course I can't tell you what it means, but we did have a Father Connor Cunningham last year, and he explained the whole thing to me in the Irish. So we use this chalice especially on St. Patrick's Day. It has a Celtic cross that makes up the body of the chalice, and is just a magnificent chalice that we use, and it has a regular Latin cross on the bottom. And so every time we use it, we're reminded of Cardinal Farley, who was one of our cardinals, archbishops here at St. Patrick's, and this brings back great memories of him. Now, these two chalices were made 25 years different from each other. One was made in 1904, what is it? Let me see. 1904 and 1929. And the reason why we put them together is that they're very significant because they both belong to Monsignor Lavelle, who was the second rector of St. Patrick's Cathedral. And this chalice was given to him when he celebrated his 25th anniversary as a priest, and this one was given to him when he celebrated his 50th anniversary as a priest. Let me just tell you a little bit about Monsignor Lavelle. Monsignor Lavelle was ordained in 1879, right here at St. Patrick's. As a matter of fact, it was only 13 days before that the church was dedicated. And so 13 days after the dedication of St. Patrick's, they ordained priests, and one of them was Michael J. Lavelle, who was of Irish descent, who came to St. Patrick's after living in Brooklyn. He was ordained a priest, and his first assignment was right here at St. Patrick's Cathedral. He was the assistant to the rector. He was what we would call nowadays a parochial vicar. And he did that job for 8 years. His rector at the time was Monsignor Msgr, and Michael Lavelle was his assistant. 8 years later, Monsignor Msgr retired, and Father Lavelle took over as the rector. So that was in 1879. No, 1887. 1887 he became the rector, and he stayed the rector until the day that he died, which was in 1939. So he was here from 1879 to 1939. That's a period of, if your math is good, you could figure it out ahead of me. It's 60 years. And of those 60 years, he was the rector for 52, and he was the assistant for 8 before that. He never had a different assignment. He never left, at least physically, or his living accommodations were always here. And just before, this is a story that I think is true, but it could be apocryphal, but before he died, there was a new Archbishop of New York, and his name was Francis Spellman. So when Archbishop Spellman arrived here at St. Patrick's, he was greeted by Monsignor Lavelle, and one of the first things that the new Archbishop said to Monsignor was that he was going to redo the inside of the cathedral of where we are right now. And Monsignor Lavelle, according to the story, said, "Over my dead body, you will." He was in his 80s, so it was, he talked a little bit like that, I think. So within a couple of months, poor Monsignor died, and one of the great privileges that he was given by the Archbishop, that he was buried underneath the main altar in the crypt where all of the Archbishops of New York are buried, from Archbishop Hughes up to Cardinal Egan. So he was the first non-Archbishop of New York to be buried in the crypt underneath the main altar. And as would be the case, over his dead body, they redid the whole inside of the cathedral. And so Monsignor Lavelle was, from his place in heaven, hopefully, he looks down and he can see that right after he died, they redid the inside, and a few decades later, we also improved on it a little bit more. And the last chalice I'm going to show you is the most important. Now, it doesn't look like the most important, does it? It's gold plated inside. The outside is a amalgam of silver and aluminum, but it's very heavy, and it's very simple. If you look at it, it's kind of simple. It doesn't have any of the designs that the other chalices have. It's not as fancy. It certainly doesn't have the workmanship that these first two have in themselves. But the reason that it makes it so important is that it's mine. So when I was ordained a priest, my parents, and it's a great tradition of seminarians becoming priests, that the parents would usually give their son the first chalice, or the chalice that he would use for the rest of his life. Now, I was ordained in 1971, and in those days we were very much into poverty, into saying that, you know, we don't need so many things that people thought we needed in the past. So when I was preparing for my last year, I went to my father and I said, "Dad, you don't need to get me a chalice, because any church that I'm going to go to, they all have chalices, and it's not something that is needed, absolutely needed, because you can always use a chalice in the church where they will send you." So my poor father, I almost broke his heart when I said that, and he was not very happy with it. So obviously I turned around, I changed my mind, and I said, "Well, Dad, okay, I'll let you you and Mom buy me my chalice, but you know me, so it's going to be a little bit more expensive than you might be ready for." That was what he thought my tastes were like. And so we went to Canada, and liturgical designers up in Canada had this made for me. The name of the company was Beaugrand, and it cost $450. Now, in 1971, that was fairly expensive for a chalice compared to the other chalices that my classmates had. Nowadays, $450 would be very inexpensive for a chalice. Now, you might notice one difference between this chalice that is mine, and all of the other four. And the big difference, besides they're all designed differently, and a chalice can be designed according to the artistry of the person who's creating the chalice. But all of these chalices have a part of the chalice is called the node, N-O-D-E. It's right here, right here, right here, right here, and right here. But this chalice does not have a node, my chalice. Now, the reason for that is that before the liturgy was reformed in the Second Vatican Council, one of the important ways of handling chalices for the priest was that the priest would keep his index and thumb fingers together after touching the Holy Eucharist, after touching the body of Christ in the form of bread. And so when he had to deal with the chalice, he would put his fingers like this and be able to keep them together and hold up the chalice at the different times when it had to be held up. Now, with the reforms of the council and the changes in the liturgy, one of the things that happened was that this symbolic putting together of the fingers was no longer necessary to be done. And so the chalice could be just held up with your hands just like this, and there was no need to put your fingers together. That was one of the reforms of the liturgy in those days. So if you see a chalice that doesn't have a node, don't think that they forgot something or that the design was lacking. It's just a different style that doesn't need what was used before, what was always necessary before. Now, a lot of chalices that are being made right now still have nodes, but they don't have to have them as importantly as they did in the old days. So that was one of our questioners. He asked me if I would to explain something about the chalices that we use here at St. Patrick's. So the two chalices that were used by our Holy Father, Pope Benedict, and used by Cardinal Dolan and myself in solemn occasions are those two in the front. These two were the chalices made for the second rector of St. Patrick's, Monsignor Lavelle, for his 25th and for his 50th anniversary. And very often I'll use one of them, especially on masses that are close to the anniversary of Monsignor's death in 1939. The Irish chalice that was given to us in honor or in memory of Cardinal Farley. And last but not least, the modern chalice from 1971 that was given to your present rector and virtual pastor for so many of you, Monsignor Ritchie. The second question was about the Cardinals' hats. Now, if you're old-time New Yorkers, or if you lived here many years ago, you might remember that the Cardinals' hats were above the sanctuary, right, where I'm kind of pointing right now with my hand. When we did the restoration of the cathedral, one of the things that we decided on doing was to take them down, have them cleaned and protected, and then put them up in a different part of the church. So right behind the altar is the area called the ambulatory. And it's a curved section where people can walk behind the altar. And above people's walking space are the four galeros, so that's what they're called. It's the red cardinal's hat called the galero with tassels on it. And the process was that when a man was appointed a cardinal, he would be given this galero, and as a symbol of his office, I think in medieval times the cardinals might have worn them, but in modern times at least Americans didn't wear them. But around the late 1960s, there was a change in the vesture of higher level clerics, so cardinals and bishops and archbishops. There were a number of changes, and one of the changes was that this galero would not be given anymore, that a red beretta, the little, much smaller hat that could be worn, and it is often worn by Cardinal Dolan. If he visits a parish very often, he'll have his beretta on, which is red, symbolizing the fact that he's a cardinal. Now, there are four galeros in the ambulatory, and they belong to Cardinal Farley, Cardinal Hayes, Cardinal Spellman, and Cardinal McCloskey. McCloskey was the first one. So they were given by the Holy Father to those four archbishops of New York. In the late 60s, they stopped giving it, so Cardinal Cook Cardinal O'Connor, Cardinal Egan, and Cardinal Dolan didn't get one of those galeros. And the tradition was that when the cardinal died, his galero would be put up in the top of his cathedral church. So if you come to visit St. Patrick's and you go to the ambulatory, you'll see the four galeros that belong to the first four cardinals here in the Archdiocese. There'll never be any more. It'll only be four because we only had, because they stopped giving them. So, but they are still here. People thought that when we restored the place and they didn't see them up there, they thought that they were gone, but they're not. We took them down, and the dirt on them was like 2-3 inches thick. They had been up so high for so long, and the New York City air for so many years was not very conducive to keeping things clean. So we had them taken away into a conservator, and they were cleaned, and they were preserved so that they'll last for a long, long time to come. So those are the two questions that were given to me this week. What is a rector? What about the cardinal's hats? And there's the answer. When I first came here, I was standing outside the sanctuary, and a lady came up and pointed to the galeros up on the top and said, are those Chinese wind chimes? And I kind of looked at her, and then when I looked at it, you could see that it, from a distance, it might look like wind chimes, but I said, no, that's the cardinal's hats. And I explained the whole thing to the lady at that time. I watched the Mass last week, offered for the Order of Malta. Following, I read about it, but it was a lot to digest. Well, I understand, I think, that they help their brothers. Why such ornate vestments and formalities? Well, the Order of Malta and the Equestrian Order of the Holy Sepulchre are two very specifically named organizations in the church, in the world, that are related to the church. The Order of Malta is a sovereign entity in itself. It has representatives to the United Nations and to many of the countries in the world. It's been around since for millennia. It was here for over 900 years now. The Holy Sepulchre is very similar. The Order of Malta is a lay religious order that is oriented toward serving the sick and the poor and defending the Catholic Church. And they've been doing that, as I said, for over 900 years. Part of the ritual is that there are specific clothing that they wear to signify their membership in the order. We Americans are much more simple, and sometimes people will say that doesn't look right, or it's surprisingly fancy, but it is part of the order itself, and part of the ritual of their praying together as a group. So here at St. Patrick's, every year we have, except again for this year, we have the investiture of the new members of the Knights and Dames of the Holy Sepulchre and the Knights and Dames of the Order of Malta. So it's they're very important to us here in New York, and they do wonderful work for the poor and the sick throughout the world in Malta. And the Order of the Holy Sepulchre has a special connection with the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem and the Latin Patriarchate of the Holy Land, serving as a source of financial assistance to the Patriarchate and to the hospital that they run, and to Catholic schools in Palestine and in Israel, and they've been doing that for many, many years too. All right, the detailed woodwork with carved designs throughout the cathedral interior, specifically the pews adjacent to the main altar and around the choir lofts, organ pipes, are representative of skilled craftsmen. Is there a historical story that can be told regarding who did the work and where? Well, any wood that you see in the cathedral, whether it's the pews, the wood on the altar, the gallery where the choir loft is, the woodwork around the sanctuary, all of that woodwork was done sometime in the 1930s. and it was very skilled. And if you could see with your own eyes up closely, the angels that are carved on the altar stalls that we have here, it's very beautifully done and very beautifully executed. It was done in America by American people sometime during the 1930s. When we were restoring the cathedral, one of the major situations was the pews. The pews had not been touched since the 1930s, and they would be cleaned, but nothing much more than that had taken place. So we had to make a decision either to get new pews or to have these pews redone. And I don't know what the financial situation was, but to get new pews would have been way, way, way up there with money. So we sent out the pews that we have right now, little by little, to a wood working company in Orange County, New York, and they took care of fixing, restaining, cleaning, and getting rid of the nicks and all of the things that people had done over the years to the pews. And they're very beautiful. And if a pew that was made in the 1930s certainly was done with a lot of skill and a lot of craftsmanship. So we're very happy that we have redone the pews that have been here for so many years. Same question to the stained glass windows. Okay, stained glass windows are very, very interesting. There's a book that we have on them. It's a small little book that yours truly wrote, and it details most of the stained glass windows. The majority of the windows on the lower floor were put here in the very beginning of the creation of the cathedral. So in 1879, when we opened the church, all of the windows that you see on the bottom were here. And there were two companies from France who made them. The windows here on the crossing were made by one company, and then all of the others were made by another company. Lorraine was the name of the company that did most of the windows. The windows on top, originally when the cathedral was opened, were clear. And the reason for that was we had no electricity, so it let the sunlight come in, and it let light be part of the cathedral before we had electrical lights themselves. So in the 1950s, those windows the clear windows were replaced, and now we have bluish windows that were created at a company in New England for St. Patrick's Cathedral. They have a kind of a blue tint to them. The Lady Chapel, again, is a separate company that did those windows. Those windows were done by a company in England called Woodruff, and again, they're very spectacular windows. They were very, very beautiful. When I wrote the book, we didn't have enough time, not so much time. I wrote so much that the book itself could only have the windows in the main part of the church. Hopefully there'll be another one coming down the pike in a year or so, outlining the windows in the Lady Chapel. They're, again, very, very spectacular if you look at them. The Lady Chapel has been compared to the chapel of the Saint-Chapelle in Paris, the beautiful holy chapel there. That is, it's a tourist, they don't have services there anymore, but it's a tourist place, and it's very magnificent, and the windows are from top to bottom and very beautiful in a blue style. And when I went in there a few years ago, first thing I thought of was our own chapel here. The Lady Chapel has similarities to it. It's not as powerful as Saint-Chapelle, but it's still very, very beautiful. This is a very interesting question. I have an answer, but I don't know if it's a complete answer. How does Cardinal Dolan and anyone else who wears a skull cap keep them on? I have wondered that for roughly 70 years since I first saw a Jewish person wearing a yarmulke. As a child, I thought there must be something special about the heads of the skull caps that kept them on, like tape or bobby pins for men with lots of hair, or pointed heads or nails. Even after I grew up, I clung to the tape idea, or in recent years, Velcro. But now when I see Cardinal Dolan wearing his skull cap, it tends to slip to one side until he adjusts it, so it can't be tape or Velcro. Is it just sitting there? And if so, why doesn't it slip off altogether? Well, first of all, the skull cap that bishops and cardinals and the Holy Father wears is called a Zucchetto, Italian word for the skull cap. And if you are a bishop, your skull cap is purple. If you are a cardinal, it's red. If you are the Pope, it's white. Priests also could wear skull caps, but they would be black. It's not very common, but sometimes priests will do that. But it is part of the dress that a bishop is obliged to wear with his vestments, and it's a symbol of his position and his role as a bishop. And what happens is that when a man becomes a bishop, he gets fitted for what size the skull cap should be, or the zucchetto should be, and he just kind of sticks it there. There's no, I've never seen bobby pins or tape or Velcro or anything like that. It just kind of sits there, and I guess if he moves his head a lot, it may have a tendency to slip, and sometimes the Cardinal Dolan will fix it, because sometimes it does slip, and he has to fix it. But it just kind of sits there, and the size is determined by the size of the head of the person who wears it, and it just kind of works its way out like that. Parishioners. Today I want to read a poem that somebody sent me, and I think it's really beautiful, and I think it's a good one for the period of the history of the world that we're going through right now. The poem is by a lady named Jane Eagleston, and it's called "It's in the Valleys I Grow." Sometimes life seems hard to bear, full of sorrows, trouble, and woe. It's then I have to remember that it's in the valleys I grow. If I always stayed on the mountaintop and never experienced pain, I would never appreciate God's love and would be living in vain. I have so much to learn, and my growth is very slow. Sometimes I need the mountaintops, but it's in the valleys I grow. I do not always understand why things happen as they do, but I am very sure of one thing: my Lord will see me through. My little valleys are nothing when I picture Christ on the cross. He went through the valley of death. His victory is Satan's loss. Forgive me, Lord, for complaining when I'm feeling so very low. Just give me a gentle reminder that it's in the valleys I grow. Continue to strengthen me, Lord, and use my life each day to share your love with others and help them find their way. Thank you for valleys, Lord. For this one thing I know: the mountaintops are glorious, but it's in the valleys I grow. By Jane Eagleston. Very nice and very poignant for the coronavirus period of life, of history that we're going through right now in our country and throughout the world.
The story of New York's great cathedral mirrors the story of the city itself. Created to affirm the ascendance of religious freedom and tolerance, St. Patrick's Cathedral was built in the democratic spirit, paid for not only by several prominent New York residents, but also by the contributions of thousands of poor Catholic immigrants. St. Patrick's Cathedral proves the adage that no generation builds a cathedral. It is rather an ongoing conversation linking generations past, present, and future. As we celebrate the feast day of St. Patrick this year, what better time is there to honor that tradition and build upon what started over 162 years ago? Beginning at 12 a.m. on March 17, 2021, join the St. Patrick's Cathedral community for the inaugural Day of Giving, a 24-hour celebration of America's parish church and the power of giving back. St. Patrick's Day has always been a special day at the cathedral, and now it's even more exciting, as Day of Giving is an opportunity for parishioners, virtual parishioners, longtime benefactors, and friends of St. Patrick's Cathedral to come together virtually and show support for their spiritual home. You choose where you want your gift to have an impact at the cathedral, and if 1,000 donors make a gift before 11:59 p.m., a generous donor will unlock $50,000 to support preservation of our beloved St. Patrick's Cathedral. Happy St. Patrick's Day.